Hey, everyone. I honestly don't know where to start. I'm sitting here, my whole world crumbled, hoping someone out there can help me make sense of what just happened. I feel like the biggest idiot alive, but maybe laying it all out will help. My wife, Jessica, let's call her Jess, and I have been married for 8 years. We've had our ups and downs like anyone else, but I thought we were solid. Jess is beautiful, smart, and yeah, she can be a bit intense, but I loved her for it. Or I thought I did. That intensity is what's currently wrecking my life. For a few months now, I've had this gut feeling. You know when something just feels off, but you don't have proof, and you second guess yourself? That's been me. Jess started staying late at work, blaming big projects or team dinners. At first, I believed her. I mean, why wouldn't I? But then, her stories started to have little holes, details that didn't quite add up. Like how her team dinner was supposedly at a steakhouse on the other side of town, but her car's GPS history showed she hadn't left the area near her office. I confronted her a few times, nothing aggressive, just, "Hey Jess, is everything okay? You seem distant." She'd laugh it off or turn it back on me, claiming I was overanalyzing because of stress at my job. I started doubting myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake it. Something wasn't right. Then, last night, the bomb dropped. We had an argument earlier in the week. Something stupid about me forgetting to take the trash out. Jess blew up in a way that felt disproportionate. She stormed out and came back hours later, acting like nothing happened. I told myself it was just stress. I even apologized, even though I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. But last night I got my answer. Jess's lover. Yeah, let's call him Tom. Showed up at our door. I don't know what I was expecting when I heard the knock, but it wasn't a raging, red-faced guy shouting, "She's been lying to both of us." I froze. I literally couldn't process what was happening. Tom went on this tirade about how Jess had been seeing him for over a year, promising him she'd leave me when the time was right, and how she'd been stringing him along, lying to him just like she'd lied to me. My heart felt like it stopped. Jess came down the stairs, saw Tom, and her face went pale. She tried to usher him out, but he wasn't having it. He told me everything. Dates, places they'd gone together, nights I thought she was working late but was actually with him. Jess kept trying to interrupt, but he'd yell over her, telling me how I deserved to know. I couldn't listen anymore. I just grabbed my keys, walked out, and drove. I don't even know where I was going. I ended up at a motel across town and just sat there, staring at the ceiling all night. I haven't been home since. Now I'm here, pouring my guts out to the internet, because I don't know what else to do. I feel so stupid, so blind. How did I not see this? How did I let it go this far? I haven't answered her calls or texts. Tom hasn't reached out again either, but his words keep echoing in my head. You deserve better than her lies. So what do I do now? How do you even begin to pick up the pieces after something like this? So, I woke up this morning in that dingy motel feeling like I was floating outside my own body. Everything was heavy, the air in my chest, my thoughts. I didn't want to check my phone, but curiosity or masochism got the better of me. There was a barrage of texts and missed calls from Jess. The text started with the usual, "Can we talk? It's not what it looks like. You know I love you, right?" And then, predictably, they turned defensive. "If you'd just listen, I could explain everything. You're being unfair, leaving like that. Are you really going to let some stranger ruin us?" The stranger. As if Tom didn't spill every dirty secret she had right on our doorstep. The nerve of her. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What would I even say? That I felt like I didn't know her anymore? That my brain was running nonstop, replaying every argument, every late night she wasn't home, trying to piece together what was real and what was a lie. The silence between us felt deafening, but I knew I needed it. Then, something hit me. What about Tom? Why did he show up at my house? Did he want to break us up? Or was he looking for revenge on her too? I needed to know. I had his number saved from Jess's texts. Yeah, I went through her phone once when I got suspicious. Guess my gut wasn't so paranoid after all. So I called him. The line rang a few times before he picked up. "Hey man," he said, sounding as awkward as I felt. "I figured you'd call. Why did you come to my house?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He sighed. Because I'm done being lied to. She promised me she'd leave you. She told me it was over between you two. But every time I brought it up, she'd make excuses. Last night, we got into a fight about it and I lost it. I said if she wouldn't tell you, I would. It felt like a gut punch hearing this from him. But the kicker? He wasn't angry at me. He was furious at her. I'm sorry, man, he added. I didn't mean to drag you into this, but you deserve the truth. I should have seen it sooner. She's unreliable. She lied to both of us. Unreliable. What a nice way of saying she played us like fools. I thanked him for telling me, though the words felt hollow. Then I hung up. I sat there staring at the motel wallpaper, letting it all sink in. Jess wasn't just unfaithful. She was calculated. She manipulated Tom, probably the way she manipulated me, to cover her tracks, to keep her perfect little double life intact. The funny thing is, I'd always thought of Jess as strong, independent, the type of woman who didn't need anyone's validation. But now I see it. She needed both of us, me for stability, Tom for excitement. And now, in one night, she's lost us both. By noon, I had to face the inevitable. I needed to go back home, at least to grab some stuff. I don't know what I expected when I walked through that door. Apologies, tears, maybe even denial. What I got was Jess sitting on the couch, arms crossed with this icy glare. So, this is how it's going to be? She snapped. I stood there, stunned. Are you serious right now? What do you want me to say? She said, throwing her hands in the air. I made a mistake, okay? But Tom's a liar. He blew this way, out of proportion. You cheated, I said quietly, not even recognizing my own voice. That's when she started crying. The kind of tears that feel rehearsed, like she was putting on a show. I was lonely, okay? You're always at work, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I couldn't even look at her. Don't, I said, shaking my head. Don't put this on me. I trusted you. She stood up, her tone shifting again, less apologetic, more defensive. So, what now? You're just going to leave? Throw everything away over one mistake. One mistake. As if it wasn't a year of sneaking around, lying to my face, making me feel like I was crazy for doubting her. I didn't even answer. I just grabbed a bag, stuffed it with clothes, and walked out the door. Her last words echoed as I closed it behind me. You're making a huge mistake, Adam. You'll regret this. But you know what? For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the one making the mistake. I didn't go far after I left. Just parked my car at a coffee shop down the street and sat there, staring at nothing while my coffee went cold. My mind was racing, but one thought kept coming back. I'm done. I can't go back. Jess's words, how I'd regret leaving, how it was just one mistake, felt like daggers. They weren't apologies. They were manipulations, attempts to keep me on her leash just like she'd done with Tom. And the worst part? I almost fell for it. Almost. By the time I left the coffee shop, it was getting dark. I checked my phone, a bunch more missed calls from Jess. Some texts, too. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. Half pleas, half guilt trips. But then, just as I was about to put my phone away, another name popped up. Tom. He'd texted me. Hey man, I know this is weird, but I thought you should know something. She just called me. I think she's trying to spin this whole thing. I should have expected it. Of course she'd call him. She was probably desperate, scrambling to patch up whatever scraps she had left. I replied, asking him what she said. His response came fast. She said she only stayed with you out of pity, that she tried leaving you, but you threatened to hurt yourself. Is that true? I felt my stomach drop. Hurt myself? Threaten her? What the hell was she trying to pull? My hands shook as I typed back. Not even close. That's a total lie. I'd never say something like that. Tom's response came just as quick. Figured. She's a pro at this stuff? I didn't reply. I couldn't. My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she had no limits. No bottom. She wouldn't scrape to save herself. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who'd say or do anything to avoid responsibility. I decided I needed to see my friend, Mike. He's been my best friend since college, the kind of guy who'll sit in the muck with you until you're ready to climb out. I hadn't told him anything yet, but the second I showed up at his place, he knew something was wrong. "Dude," he said, opening the door. "You look like hell." I walked in and spilled everything. The affair. Tom showing up. Jess's attempts to twist the story. He listened, didn't interrupt, just let me vent until I was out of breath. Finally, he leaned back and said, "So what's the plan?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know. I can't go back, that's for sure. But the house, the bills, the everything, it's all a mess." "Stay here," Mike said without hesitation. "For as long as you need. We'll figure the rest out." That's the thing about real friends. They don't ask for explanations. They just show up. I crashed on his couch that night, the first real sleep I'd gotten in days. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, I woke up to another text from Tom. She just called again. Wanted to clear the air. Said she's still in love with me and that she's filing for divorce because you're unstable. Thought you'd want to know. Filing for divorce? I hadn't even told her I wanted a divorce yet. She was just taking control of the narrative as usual, painting herself as the victim, me as the monster. I realized then that staying silent wasn't an option. Jess wasn't going to stop spinning her web of lies unless I cut it down. So I called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Adam, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Can we just talk? Cut the crap, Jess." I snapped. "I know you've been calling Tom. I know you've been lying to him about me. And I'm not going to let you twist this into something it's not." There was a long pause. Then her voice shifted colder, sharper. "So what? You're just going to throw 8 years away? Over this? Do you even care about our life together? The house? Our friends?" Her words hit me, but not the way she intended. It wasn't regret in her voice. It was desperation. She wasn't sad about losing me. She was terrified of losing the image of us, of being the perfect wife in the perfect marriage. "You already threw it away, Jess," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I hung up before she could reply. That was the moment I knew for sure. This wasn't salvageable. There was no fixing this. Jess had burned every bridge, and I wasn't about to rebuild them. It was time to move forward, time to figure out who I was without her lies clouding my life. But damn, that's easier said than done. After I hung up on Jess, I felt something strange, relief. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had clarity. I didn't need her excuses, her manipulations, or her tears. I needed freedom. The weight of her lies was suffocating, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. But of course, Jess wasn't done. That evening, while I was still at Mike's place, my phone buzzed with a notification from our shared bank account. Jess had withdrawn $5,000. I stared at the notification in disbelief, my mind racing. What the hell was she doing? I immediately called her, and she actually picked up. "What's this withdrawal, Jess?" I asked, my voice ice cold. She didn't even try to deny it. "I needed the money," she said flatly. "For legal fees. Since you've made it clear you're leaving me, I need to protect myself." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Protect herself? She was the one who cheated, the one who dragged me into this mess, and now she was acting like the victim. "You're unbelievable," I said. "You cheated on me, lied to me, and now you're using our money to cover your ass." "It's my money too, Adam," she shot back. "Don't forget that." The conversation devolved into a shouting match, one I knew I wasn't going to win. Jess had a way of twisting words, turning everything into a battle of semantics. By the time I hung up, I was drained, angry, and feeling even more defeated than before. Mike walked into the living room, handing me a beer. "Let me guess, Jess drama?" I nodded, filling him in on the latest. Mike listened quietly, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he said, "You need a lawyer, dude. Like yesterday. If she's already pulling this crap, it's only going to get worse." He was right, of course. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew I needed someone in my corner. Jess wasn't going to make this easy. The following days were a whirlwind. Between meeting with the attorney, packing up some of my things from the house, and dodging Jess's constant calls, I barely had time to think. But there was one conversation I couldn't avoid: telling my family. My mom, God bless her, is one of those eternal optimists who always sees the good in people. When I told her Jess had been cheating on me, she actually said, "Are you sure? Maybe it's a misunderstanding." I had to take a deep breath before responding. "Mom, it's not a misunderstanding. She's been with someone else for over a year. I have proof." Her voice softened. "Oh, Adam, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Was I okay?" Honestly, I didn't know. Some moments I felt numb. Other moments I wanted to scream, cry, punch something, or all three at once. But I told her I was fine, because that's what you do when your mom asks. You lie. Then came the part one was dreading most: telling my friends. Jess and I shared so many of them, and I knew the fallout from this would be messy. Sure enough, the moment I started explaining what had happened, the questions poured in. "Wait, Jess cheated? No way. She always seemed so devoted to you. Are you sure, man? That doesn't sound like Jess. Wow. I mean, I'm sorry, but are you sure you didn't drive her to it?" That last one stung the most. It wasn't said maliciously, but it hit me where it hurt. Had I done something to push Jess away? Had I missed signs? Failed her in some way? The rational part of me knew better. This wasn't my fault. But the doubts lingered, whispering in the back of my mind. And then came the worst twist of all. One of my friends, let's call him Kevin, dropped a bombshell. Over beers one night, he confessed that Jess had tried hitting on him a few months ago. She'd been drunk at a party, pulled him aside, and made some not-so-subtle advances. He'd shut it down immediately, of course, but he hadn't told me at the time because he didn't want to cause problems. "Dude," Kevin said, looking genuinely guilty, "I'm sorry. I should have told you. Maybe this could have been avoided." I didn't know what to say. Jess wasn't just unfaithful. She was reckless. And now, every memory I had of her felt tainted, every happy moment a lie. How many other things had she hidden from me? How many other people knew what was happening while I was oblivious? By the end of the week, I was a wreck. My marriage was over. My savings were bleeding out, and my relationships with friends and family were strained. Jess had taken a wrecking ball to my life, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But there was one thing she couldn't take from me: my resolve. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. She might have shattered our marriage, but she wouldn't shatter me. This was the beginning of the end, but it was also the start of something new. I just wasn't sure what that something was yet. By the weekend, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. Jess had taken money from our account, tried to smear me to her lover, and made me question the integrity of some of my closest friendships. I was drained, but determined to move forward. Little did I know the storm wasn't over. It was just building. I decided to stop by the house to grab more of my stuff. I texted Jess ahead of time to let her know I'd be coming by. Her response was eerily accommodating. "Sure, I'll be out for the afternoon. Take whatever you need." Something about it didn't sit right. Jess isn't the type to roll over that easily. Still, I wasn't in the mood for confrontation, so I hoped she was actually leaving me alone this time. When I got to the house, everything seemed normal at first. The place was quiet. Too quiet. As I packed up some clothes and a few personal items, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then I walked into the kitchen. My heart stopped. Sitting on the counter was a stack of papers. Divorce papers, to be exact. Jess had taken the first step, filing on her own terms. There was a note on top in her familiar handwriting. "Since you clearly don't want to work on this marriage, here you go. Let's get this over with. P.S. I'm keeping the house." The audacity of it hit me like a freight train. She's keeping the house? The house that I'd poured countless hours and dollars into fixing up? The house that held memories, both good and bad, of our life together? She wasn't even asking. She was declaring it as hers. I grabbed the papers and flipped through them. As expected, they were riddled with demands that painted her as the victim. Spousal support, the majority of our shared savings, and yes, the house. It was all there in black and white, her blatant attempt to walk away with everything. But the worst part wasn't the demands. It was the narrative she was spinning in the paperwork. She'd claimed emotional neglect as the grounds for divorce, framing me as an inattentive husband who worked too much and cared too little. It was a story designed to win sympathy, to justify her actions, and to put me on the defensive. I felt the anger boiling in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. When I got back to Mike's, I showed him the papers. He skimmed through them, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's seriously trying to keep everything," he said. "After what she did to you?" I nodded, barely able to speak. "I don't even care about the house or the money at this point. It's the lies. She's rewriting history to make me look like the bad guy." Mike, ever the practical one, said, "Well, then you fight back. You've got proof, right? About the affair?" That was the one silver lining in this mess. Between Tom's confession, screenshots of their texts, and my own knowledge of her movements, I had plenty of evidence to counter her narrative. My lawyer had already advised me to document everything, and I'd done just that. Now it was time to use it. The next day, I met with my lawyer. She was a no-nonsense woman who didn't mince words. After I explained the situation and handed over the divorce papers, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, "your soon-to-be ex certainly doesn't lack nerve." She flipped through the documents, occasionally raising an eyebrow or muttering under her breath. When she was done, she looked at me and said, "The good news? You got a strong case. The bad news? This is going to get ugly." I nodded. I'm ready for it. And I was. Jess had underestimated me, assuming I'd roll over and let her take everything. But she didn't realize something important. I wasn't fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting for my dignity, for my name, for the truth. That evening, I got a call from Tom. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "I just wanted to let you know." Jess called me again. Of course she had. "What now?" I asked, already bracing myself. "She told me you're trying to take everything from her," he said. "Said you're dragging this out to punish her." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, well, she's good at playing the victim." Tom hesitated, then said, "Listen, I don't know if this helps, but I'm done with her. I told her to lose my number. She's toxic, man. I just thought you should know." It was a small consolation, but I appreciated the gesture. At least Jess's web of lies was starting to unravel. Slowly but surely, people were seeing her for who she really was. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, packing up my things, and leaning on Mike for support. Jess kept trying to reach me, alternating between rage-filled texts and saccharine pleas for one more chance. I ignored all of it. I'd finally accepted the truth. The woman I thought I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. This wasn't the end I wanted, but it was the one I needed. I was finally cutting ties, breaking free from the lies and manipulation. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Because when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way left to go: up. The thing about divorces, and honestly any betrayal, is that they take time to process. Even when you think you've hit bottom, there's always another layer to peel back, another gut punch realization about what you missed or ignored. After filing a response to Jess's absurd demands, things started to escalate. She wasn't just trying to take the house and money anymore. She was trying to destroy my reputation. She started reaching out to our mutual friends, spinning her version of events. How I was cold and distant, how she'd been pushed into the arms of someone else because of my neglect. Some people ate it up, others saw through her. But every call or text I got asking for my side felt like a fresh wound. I'd lost not just my wife, but the life we'd built. Friendships were fracturing, and the house I once thought of as a sanctuary was now a battleground. Still, I wasn't about to let Jess walk away unscathed. My lawyer had assured me we had a solid case, but court dates were still weeks away, and every day felt like a marathon. Then came a social media post. Jess had been quiet for a few days, and I should have known she was plotting something. She uploaded a long, dramatic diatribe about how she was standing strong in the face of abuse and lies, claiming she was escaping a toxic marriage and fighting to rebuild her life after years of emotional neglect. She didn't mention me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. The comments were a mixed bag. Some people, mostly her family and a few acquaintances who didn't know the full story, rallied around her with "You're so brave" and "Stay strong, girl." Others questioned her narrative, subtly pointing out that it seemed one-sided or asking why she hadn't mentioned any of this before. My phone blew up again, with friends forwarding me screenshots and asking if I'd seen it. I wanted to respond, to post the truth, the receipts, the screenshots of her messages with Tom, the proof of her lies. But my lawyer warned me against it. "Don't stoop to her level," she said. "We'll handle this in court." It was good advice, but it didn't make it any easier. Jess's lies were out there, spreading like wildfire, while I was stuck sitting on the truth, unable to defend myself. A few days later, I got a surprise text from Jess's best friend, Emily. She and I had always been friendly, though not particularly close. The message read, "Hey Adam, can we talk? I think there are things you should know." I called her immediately, and she wasted no time getting to the point. "I'm done with Jess," Emily said. "I can't support what she's doing anymore." Apparently, Jess had been using Emily as a sounding board throughout the affair, telling her everything. How she justified it, how she planned to leave me but wanted to secure her future first, even how she deliberately hid money in a separate account I didn't know about. Emily had gone along with it for a while, thinking it was just venting, but Jess's recent behavior was too much for her. The lies, the manipulation, it was all too ugly. "She's not who I thought she was," Emily admitted. "I feel sick even being associated with her at this point." Hearing that was validating, but it also stung. Emily confirmed what I'd already suspected. Jess's betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse. It was calculated. She'd planned every move, from the affair to the financial games, long before I ever found out. Armed with Emily's account and more evidence than I knew what to do with, I started to feel some sense of control again. My lawyer filed motions to contest Jess's claims, and I finally had witnesses willing to testify to her behavior. It was messy, but it was progress. Still, the emotional toll was relentless. Every time I thought I'd processed everything, something new would surface. Another lie, another memory that now felt tainted. I started therapy, not just to deal with the divorce, but to unpack years of blind trust and the patterns that allowed me to ignore red flags. The final straw came about a week later. Jess sent me an email, long, rambling, and full of contradictions. She claimed she wanted to settle things amicably, but also doubled down on her demands for the house and savings. She said she was willing to forgive me for the things I'd done wrong in the marriage if I just agreed to her terms. Forgive me? For what? Working overtime to pay the bills? Trusting her when she said she was late because of work? Believing in our marriage while she was off playing house with Tom? That email was the moment I stopped feeling sad and started feeling free. Jess had built her entire narrative on a foundation of lies, and it was crumbling beneath her. I didn't need her forgiveness. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her at all. By the time our court date rolled around, I was ready. My lawyer presented the evidence calmly and methodically, dismantling Jess's claims one by one. Emily testified, along with Tom, who, bless his misguided soul, confirmed every detail of the affair. Jess tried to play the victim, but the judge wasn't buying it. In the end, I walked away with more than I expected. I kept the house. The financial settlement was fair, not skewed in her favor like she'd hoped. And most importantly, I walked away with my dignity intact. Now, sitting here in the quiet of what used to be our house, I finally feel like it's mine again. There's still so much to process, but one thing is clear. I'm better off without her. Jess thought she could control the narrative, but the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how deeply it's buried. The bridges between us are burned, and honestly, I'm not looking back. The aftermath of the court ruling was surreal. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I was left with this overwhelming emptiness. Jess had tried so hard to ruin me, to rewrite our story in her favor, and yet I'd come out on top. I kept the house. I held on to my savings. But what now? Walking through the house was like stepping into a museum of a life that didn't feel like mine anymore. Every corner held memories, some good, some now unbearable. The couch where we used to binge watch our favorite shows. The kitchen where she'd laugh while I burned pancakes on lazy Sunday mornings. I couldn't tell what hurt more, the good memories that felt like lies or the bad ones that I'd ignored to keep us together. But I knew one thing: I couldn't stay stuck. If I let myself wallow, Jess would still win in a way. She'd still control my life, even from a distance. So, I started with small steps. The first thing I did was redecorate. It felt almost symbolic, like I was reclaiming the space for myself. I ripped down the cheesy live, laugh, love sign she'd insisted on hanging in the living room because, let's be honest, there was very little laughing or loving in that room. I donated furniture we'd picked out together and replaced it with pieces that felt more me. The house started to look different, less like a shrine to our failed marriage and more like a fresh start. Next came rebuilding my social circle. Jess's lies had fractured a lot of my friendships, but I learned quickly who my real friends were. People like Mike, who'd stuck by me through everything. Emily, who'd risked her relationship with Jess to tell me the truth. And even some friends who had initially bought Jess's version of events, but came back to apologize when the truth came out in court. One night, over beers with Mike and a few of our mutual friends, I admitted something I hadn't said out loud yet. I don't know who I am without her. Mike, ever the blunt one, said, "Dude, that's the best part. You get to figure it out now. No lies, no bullshit. Just you." And he was right. For the first time in years, I didn't have to live in someone else's shadow. I didn't have to play the role of the dutiful husband while Jess did whatever she wanted behind my back. I was free. Therapy became a lifeline during those weeks. My therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, didn't let me wallow in self-pity. Instead, she helped me confront the deeper issues I'd been avoiding for years. My tendency to ignore red flags, my fear of confrontation, my belief that love meant sacrificing everything, even myself. "Jess isn't the first person who lied to you," Karen said during one session. "But she's the one who hurt you most because you trusted her with everything. The question isn't why she lied. It's why you let her." That hit hard, but she was right. Jess's actions were her own, but I'd ignored the signs, excused the behavior, because I wanted so badly to believe in the version of her I'd fallen in love with. Coming to terms with that was like ripping off a Band-Aid, but it was necessary. Then there was Tom. I hadn't heard from him since the court case, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said the last time we talked. "She's toxic, man. I'm done with her." Part of me wondered if he'd moved on or if Jess was still trying to sink her claws into him. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I blocked her number, deleted old photos, and unfollowed her on social media. The clean break was long overdue. One night, a few weeks later, I sat in the living room, my living room, finally mine, and scrolled through my phone. I saw an old group photo from a barbecue Mike had hosted years ago. Jess was in the picture, her arm draped around me, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. At the time, I thought that smile meant she loved me. Now, I wasn't so sure. I deleted the photo. It felt cathartic, like closing a door that had been open too long. And as I sat there, in the quiet of my reclaimed home, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Hurt? Sure. Betrayed? Definitely. But the anger, the burning, all-consuming rage was gone. Because Jess didn't control me anymore. She didn't get to dictate how I felt or what my future looked like. She was just a chapter in my story, and I was ready to turn the page. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. They weren't perfect. I still burned the edges, but I didn't care. I ate them while scrolling through ideas for a solo trip I'd been planning. Maybe a cabin in the mountains. Maybe the beach. Somewhere quiet, where I could think about what I wanted next. It wasn't a big moment. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt significant. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, or maybe like someone new, someone stronger. The journey wasn't over, but I was moving forward. And for now, that was enough. It's strange how quiet life feels after a storm. For months, my existence had been consumed by chaos, Jess's lies, the divorce, the fallout with friends. Now that it was over, there was nothing but silence. No fights, No phone calls, no lawyers. Just me and the life I had left to rebuild. But quiet isn't always peaceful. It's haunting. The memories of Jess still lingered like ghosts in the house. I'd walk into the kitchen and remember the nights we used to cook together. Or sit on the porch and think about the mornings we'd drink coffee there, talking about nothing and everything. The hardest part wasn't the bad memories. It was the good ones. The ones that made me question if it had all been a lie. Was there ever a moment when she loved me as much as I loved her? Or had I just been a placeholder, someone convenient, until she found someone else? I kept going to therapy. Karen had a way of cutting through my bullshit, which I appreciated more than I thought I would. One session, I told her about the memories, how they made me feel like I'd lost not just Jess, but the version of myself who believed in her. Of course you miss the good times, Karen said. But don't confuse the memories with the person. The Jess you remember. The one who laughed with you on the porch, who cooked dinner with you. She's not the same Jess who cheated. People can be two things at once. The hard part is learning to accept that. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it was what I needed. I couldn't erase the memories, but I didn't have to let them define me either. A few weeks later, I ran into someone unexpected. I was at the grocery store grabbing some frozen pizza for dinner because cooking for one felt like too much effort. And there she was, Emily. She looked surprised to see me, but she smiled warmly. "Adam," she said, "how are you holding up?" "Better," I admitted. "Still figuring things out, but better." We stood there in the frozen food aisle for a while, catching up. She told me she'd cut ties with Jess completely. "I just couldn't do it anymore," she said. The lies, the manipulation. It was exhausting. I thanked her again for speaking up during the divorce. If it weren't for her, Jess might have gotten away with so much more. Emily shrugged, like it was no big deal, but I could tell it meant something to her to hear my gratitude. As we said goodbye, she hesitated. "You deserve better, you know," she said softly. "Don't let her make you think otherwise." That conversation stuck with me. For so long, I'd been fixated on everything I'd lost, my marriage, my sense of trust, the life I thought I was building. But maybe Emily was right. Maybe there was something better waiting for me on the other side of this. I started pushing myself to do more. I took that solo trip I'd been dreaming about, a cabin in the mountains where I spent a week hiking, reading, and just being. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. It felt good to move, to sweat, to feel my body working for something other than stress. And slowly, bit by bit, I started to find pieces of myself I thought I'd lost. The Adam I was before Jess, the one who loved bad jokes, who got too competitive at board games, who dreamed about writing a novel someday, he wasn't gone. He was still there, buried under layers of hurt and doubt. I just had to dig him out. One night, I was sitting on the porch, sipping a beer and staring at the stars when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jess. "I hope you're doing okay," it read. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know that." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply, to tell her how much damage she'd done, how her apology didn't even scratch the surface of what she owed me. But another part of me knew it didn't matter. Her words couldn't undo what she'd done, and I didn't need her validation to move on. So I deleted the message. No reply, no second thoughts, just gone. It's been months now since the divorce was finalized. Life still isn't perfect, but it's mine again. I've started writing that novel just for fun. I've been spending more time with friends, rebuilding the connections Jess tried to sever. And I've been focusing on me, not who I was with Jess, but who I want to be now. The ghosts of us still linger sometimes. I won't pretend they don't, but they don't haunt me like they used to. They're just shadows now, fading a little more each day. And for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Hopeful for a future that's mine to shape. Hopeful for a love that doesn't come with lies and betrayal. Hopeful for a life where I'm not defined by what happened to me, but by what I choose to do next. It's funny how life has a way of finding balance, even after everything feels like it's been turned upside down. I've settled into something resembling a new routine. My mornings are quiet, coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise. My nights are peaceful, books instead of arguments, sleep without tension. For the first time in years, I feel steady. But it's not all smooth sailing. There are moments when the past sneaks up on me. I'll hear a song we used to play while making dinner, or I'll see a couple holding hands and feel that pang of loss. I don't miss Jess. I've come too far for that. But I miss the idea of what we had. Or, more accurately, what I thought we had. Therapy has been a lifesaver. Karen keeps me grounded when I start to spiral. In one session, I admitted something I'd been holding back. I'm scared I'll never trust anyone again. She nodded, like she'd been expecting it. That's a natural fear after betrayal. But trust isn't about other people. It's about you. It's about knowing you can survive, even if someone else breaks your trust again. That hit me hard. It wasn't about avoiding hurt. It was about knowing I could handle it if it happened. I've carried that with me ever since. A few weeks ago, I got an invitation to Mike's birthday party. It was the first big social event I'd been to since everything fell apart. Part of me wanted to skip it, to avoid the inevitable questions and awkwardness. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. When I walked into Mike's house, the noise hit me like a wall, laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. It was overwhelming at first, but then I saw Mike grinning at me from across the room. Adam, about time you showed up. He pulled me into the kitchen, handed me a beer, and introduced me to a few new faces. One of them was Sarah. Sarah wasn't what I expected. She wasn't loud or flashy, the kind of person who demands attention. She was quiet but confident, with this calm energy that instantly put me at ease. We ended up talking for most of the night, about books, travel, life. It felt easy. When the party wound down, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. For a split second, I hesitated. Was I ready? Could I trust myself to start something new? But then I thought about what Karen said about trusting myself, and I said yes. Coffee with Sarah turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks in the park. And before I knew it, I was smiling more, laughing more. She wasn't a distraction or a replacement. She was just someone I enjoyed being around. Someone who made me feel like myself again. One night, over dinner, I told her about Jess. Not everything, but enough. I expected her to recoil, to see me as damaged goods. But instead, she just said, "That sounds like it was really hard. I'm glad you're on the other side of it." She didn't pity me. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And that meant more than I can put into words. Life isn't perfect, but it's good. I've started to trust myself again, to trust the people I let into my life. Sarah and I are taking things slow, and that's exactly what I need. I'm still writing, still running, still figuring out who I am without Jess's shadow looming over me. The ghosts of my past are quieter now. They still whisper sometimes, but their voices are faint, easy to ignore. I'm not defined by what Jess did to me or by the marriage we lost. I'm defined by the choices I'm making now, the people I surround myself with, the dreams I'm chasing, the life I'm building. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. A few months after meeting Sarah, I found myself standing in my backyard, looking out at the garden Jess and I had started together. It had been neglected during all the chaos, overgrown, wild, barely recognizable. But instead of feeling sad, I felt a strange sense of determination. It was time to clean it up, to make it mine. I spent the entire weekend out there, pulling weeds, trimming hedges, and planting new flowers. By the end of it, I was covered in dirt, but the space looked completely different, fresh, alive, like a symbol of the new chapter one was creating. When Sarah stopped by that evening, she smiled and said, "It suits you." I didn't realize how much that garden would come to symbolize for me. Rebuilding something broken takes time, patience, and effort, but when you put the work in, the results are worth it. It wasn't just about the garden, it was about me. Around this time, I also started reconnecting with people I pulled away from during the divorce. Old friends, co-workers, even family. One afternoon, I went to visit my parents. My mom hugged me tighter than she had in years and said, "We're proud of you, Adam. You've been through so much, but you've come out stronger." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I felt like a failure, like I'd let everyone down by not saving my marriage. But now, I realized that leaving Jess wasn't a failure. It was a decision to choose myself, to step away from something toxic and build a healthier life. Sarah and I were still taking things slow, but there was something steady and comforting about her presence. She never pushed me to be anything other than what I was, a man healing from a messy past, but hopeful about the future. She didn't try to fix me because she understood I didn't need fixing. I just needed space to grow. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch together, I asked her what she saw in me. "I'm a bit of a mess," I admitted, half joking. She laughed softly and said, "Aren't we all? But you're honest, and you're trying. That's more than most people can say." It was such a simple answer, but it meant everything. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got another text from Jess. It had been months since I'd last heard from her. This time, it wasn't an apology or an accusation. It was a simple, "I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the door firmly closed. But another part of me, the part that had worked so hard to let go of the anger, wanted to acknowledge it, not for her sake, but for mine. So, I replied, "I am. I hope you are too." That was it. Short, simple, and final. I didn't need anything from her anymore. No closure, no explanations, no apologies. I'd found my own peace, and that was enough. A few days later, as I sat down to work on my novel, I realized something had shifted. Writing had always been a way to escape, to process my thoughts, but now it felt like more than that. It felt like a way to create something new, something entirely mine. The story I was writing wasn't about heartbreak or betrayal. It was about resilience, about finding light in the darkest places. It wasn't my story, exactly, but it was shaped by everything I'd been through. And for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about what I was creating. Life isn't perfect, but it's real. The ghosts of Jess and our broken marriage still linger occasionally, but they no longer hold power over me. I've reclaimed my space, my time, and my sense of self. The garden is thriving, the novel is coming along, and my heart feels open, not just to Sarah, but to whatever comes next. Sometimes I think about the man I was before all this. The man who trusted too easily, who ignored red flags, who thought love was enough to fix anything. I don't see him as a fool anymore. I see him as someone who tried, who gave everything he had. And now, I'm someone who's learned how to give that love to myself. When the dust settles, you see things clearly. And what I see is a life full of possibility, a life I'm ready to embrace. As the months rolled on, I started noticing small changes in myself, things I hadn't realized were missing. I catch myself laughing at dumb jokes Mike would tell, or feeling genuinely excited to make plans for the weekend. Little things that once felt impossible now felt like victories. The garden I'd revived became a favorite spot for Sarah and me. One afternoon, as we sat there sipping iced tea, she looked around and said, "You've made this place so alive. It feels like you." I didn't reply immediately, but her words stayed with me. She was right. The garden, the house, even my routines, they were reflections of who I was becoming. Someone who didn't just survive, but thrived. Someone who rebuilt. One weekend, while cleaning out a closet I hadn't touched since Jess left, I found an old box of keepsakes. Pictures, ticket stubs, anniversary cards, little pieces of a life I'd left behind. For a moment, I thought about tossing it all, but something stopped me. Instead, I sat on the floor and sifted through the memories. There was a picture of Jess and me from our honeymoon, both of us smiling, so brightly it was almost blinding. I didn't feel anger looking at it, just a quiet sadness for the people we were then, for the hope we'd had. I kept a few items that felt meaningful, a reminder of the lessons I'd learned, and threw the rest away. Letting go wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making room for the future. That night, I shared the experience with Sarah. I expected her to feel awkward, maybe even jealous, but she didn't. She just listened, nodding as I explained how it felt to let go of something I once thought I couldn't live without. "You're allowed to grieve what you lost," she said softly, "even if it wasn't good for you in the end." Her words were a gift, permission to feel, to remember without being consumed by it. By the time the holidays rolled around, I was in a place I never thought I'd be: happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from ignoring pain, but the kind that grows from working through it. I spent Thanksgiving with Mike's family and Christmas with my parents, both times surrounded by people who reminded me what love really looks like. And then there was Sarah. We'd grown closer, but it was never rushed or forced. She gave me space to heal, and in doing so, she became a part of that healing. She wasn't just someone I was dating. She was someone I could imagine building a future with. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about what's next?" I knew what she meant, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope. "I think about it all the time," I said. "And for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of it." We sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The horizon stretched out before us, full of possibilities. The ghosts of my past still show up now and then. A song, a scent, a memory will pull me back for a moment. But they're just echoes now, faint and fleeting. They don't define me. I've learned that life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about finding joy despite it. In the end, Jess didn't break me. She forced me to find the strength I didn't know I had, to rebuild a life that's mine in every sense of the word. And for that, oddly enough, I'm grateful. Because the man I am today, he's someone I'm proud to be. And the life I'm living, it's one I'm excited to wake up to every day. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I found myself standing in the garden I'd rebuilt, staring at the rows of flowers and vegetables that had grown under my care. It was a small thing, really, but it felt monumental. That space had once been a symbol of everything Jess and I were trying to create, and now it was something entirely my own, a reflection of who I was becoming. That evening, Sarah came over for dinner. It wasn't a special occasion, just a quiet night in, the kind that had become our favorite. We cooked together, laughing as she teased me about my inability to chop onions without crying, and sat down at the table as the sun dipped below the horizon. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter these days. Happier." I thought about it for a moment. "I think I am," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm not carrying so much weight. Like I'm finally living for myself." Her smile was warm, full of understanding. "You deserve that," she said simply. A few weeks later, I took a leap I'd been considering for months. I quit my corporate job. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I'd been planning it for a while, saving up, thinking about what I wanted next. The truth was, the job had always been more about stability than passion, and after everything that had happened, I wanted more than that. I started working part-time at a local bookstore, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought was practical. It didn't pay as much, but it gave me time to focus on my writing. For the first time, I was prioritizing what made me happy instead of what felt safe. One evening, as I was closing up the store, I got a text from Jess. It was brief. "Hey, just wanted to say congrats on the new job. I saw it on Facebook. Looks like you're doing well." I stared at the message for a moment, debating whether to reply. In the end, I didn't. There was no malice in her words, but I didn't need her acknowledgement. I didn't need anything from her anymore. That realization felt like freedom. Life kept moving forward, and so did I. The novel I'd been working on was starting to take shape. Pages filled with stories of resilience, loss, and love. It wasn't autobiographical, exactly, but it was infused with pieces of my journey, my struggles, my triumphs. One day, Sarah asked if she could read a chapter. I was hesitant at first, nervous about sharing something so personal, but her enthusiasm was contagious. She sat on the couch, reading silently, her expressions shifting as she moved through the pages. When she finished, she looked up and said, "This is beautiful, honest and raw. You have to keep going." Her encouragement meant the world to me. For so long, I doubted myself, but now I was starting to believe again in my work, in my choices, in my future. The year ended with a quiet celebration. Sarah and I watched the New Year's fireworks from the porch, sipping champagne and talking about the past and the future. As the clock struck midnight, she leaned over and kissed me, a kiss that felt like a promise. "To new beginnings," she said softly. "To new beginnings," I echoed. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. Life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes painful, but it's also full of beauty and second chances. Jess was a chapter in my story, a painful one, but an important one. She taught me what I deserve and what I'll never settle for again. She forced me to confront my fears and find strength I didn't know I had. And now, I'm writing the next chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt from the ground up. The horizon stretches out before me, wide and full of possibility, and I'm ready to step into it.